Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. Super grateful for the Family Office Insights community dialing in and listening and sharing it as you have. Thank you very much for that. We have a lot of interesting people that have been on, and we have another one today. I think you'll enjoy what Logan has to say, especially if you're an investor looking to deploy capital into a company and a company looking to credential what they're doing on some level. So we're going to learn all about that today. So Logan, thanks for being here. If you want to start at the beginning, that would be awesome.
Thanks so much for having me, Arthur. And I just love the Arthur's Roundtable. I just love that as a name.
It was just so easy, right?
Takes us back to days of yore. So my story is that I've made a lot of observations about people and teams in my profession, which has mostly been in the impact investing world. So I've spent a lot of time in private equity and early stage investing, deploying capital and raising money for financial products and for businesses that make a difference in the world. And that's primarily been in agriculture and forestry. In the past, some ocean related investing. And along the way, I made a lot of observations that leadership capacity or lack thereof, or team dynamics were inhibiting these projects, these businesses, these financial products from being more successful. And so even though my training is mostly in the finance world and business, I started wondering if there was a better way to evaluate leadership readiness, improve team dynamics in a more systematic way, and create situations where people analytics and people dynamics were improved so that we could actually have better outcomes. We've all had experiences where, we didn't get along with our manager, or there was some issue in a team dynamic that prevented something from happening that we really wanted to happen. And so this is not like a problem that is small. And so going along in my career, I started at an environmental think tank. I moved into the investing world in my mid-20s. I went to Yale Business School and got a master's degree in forestry and an MBA. I worked for Morgan Stanley, a family office network, and I started my own sell-side advisory firm. And that's basically what I did in addition to a farmland investing. I worked at a farmland investing group, private equity firm, right before I started this company.
Nice.
So,
yeah. So it's not as simple as, when you have people working together, there's a very strong likelihood that people have different agendas and they're not going to get along. I mean, it's not that simple, right? Because that happens all the time. And so is your assessment in your business, which we'll talk about in detail if you like, go beyond the leadership readiness, or is it totally focused on that?
well, it's as you said, it's often these solutions are more complex when you dig in, but the basic problem we're solving is a mismatch of the right leaders in the right place, like whether a leader is ready to take on the complexity and pressure of a role, and whether they're going to be successful in execution of what they need to do to be successful in that role. And so I can break that down a little bit. For startups, we have developed an assessment tool that looks at 6 kind of core constructs that are relatable and important for an early stage startup environment, which is high pressure and high complexity. And so we're looking at things like, how coachable is this person? How good are they at pivoting when they need to strategically, but keeping their eye on the prize? How good are they at relational intelligence? What about team climate IQ? How good are they at creating a presence of psychological safety so their team feels motivated to work with them? Like these are some of the things that we can tease out using the transcript data that we pull from interviews and from presentations.
So that was going to be my next question. Thanks for doing that. So when people do an assessment, like I haven't had a job for 40 years, so I don't know what it's
You're
like.
your own boss.
Well, I don't know who's the boss, but it's the I haven't had the opportunity to apply for a job, so I don't know what that process is like.
Yeah.
And not this is not about me, but I also don't hire anybody because I'm terrible at it. So I let other people do that. But uh, oftentimes you can game against a questionnaire, right?
Right.
But what you just said is really interesting because it's part of it presumably is not a questionnaire. It's looking at stuff that they already done that they know they're not being questioned about, right?
Exactly. Thank you for digging in on that. So we can take any transcript data of you speaking, whether it's in this conversation or a podcast, presentation you delivered, or a YouTube, interview, and we can take, if we have enough content, we can evaluate you on a variety of different metrics or constructs, if you will, and assess this leadership capacity component that I think is missing in most leadership assessments. And AI is enabling us to do this faster, cheaper, and better
Got to be
than
amazing.
in the past.
I mean, it's you can just well, you know this already, but you can just drop a transcript into ChatGTP and say, okay, pull out the key wisdom notes of this, and then of course it makes mistakes and all that kind of stuff, but it would take an analyst 2 days to do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
They have to listen to the video or read the transcript, and in 3 seconds, AI has already done that. It's amazing, right?
Yeah. So humans develop along a trajectory, and this is studied extensively in what's called adult vertical development theory. And so it's a body of psychology that um, essentially can pinpoint where you are along your developmental curve as a human being.
Super interesting, right?
And so we're picking out the way you speak and the patterns that come out in how you tell stories and share perspective that can pinpoint where you are along this trajectory. And they're kind of just these different posts along this, climbing a mountain, essentially. There's these
Yeah.
different levels that you can reach. And so it's not bad or good where you are. It just is. And then there's things you can do to improve that and improve your capacity.
And where do you find? So my one of my immediate reactions to this was, uh, why would a founder subject themselves to this if they thought the outcome might be detrimental to them, either raising money or getting investors? And is it potentially hazardous?
I think that's such a interesting perspective that's come up a number of times, and I have what I think is a good answer to it, or at least perspective on it. One is that everyone's always getting evaluated all the time. And so how it works in the early stage investing world, at least from my experience and from doing a lot of over 125 interviews with VCs and accelerators at this point for this company alone, is it's warm referrals, it's gut checks, and it's a reference check or two. Or four. And so it's a pretty informal process, like how founders are getting evaluated at this point. And there's this black box in that gut feel that I just mentioned. And so most people wouldn't say what you said, Arthur, that you're not
Really?
that great at, hiring people and you have other people do it. Most people think that they're really good at reading people. And so we have this situation where, yes, starting a company and running a startup is it's risky, but we have 65% of companies failing because of some kind of people problem. And
Mhm.
so even if not all of that is attributed to leadership capacity, what we're identifying, there's still some mismatch in between, someone's gut feeling and how they're evaluating the team or the leader and the outcomes that we're seeing in terms of success rates, or why companies are failing. And so my argument is, isn't this better than not having the information? Like you
As an
can,
investor, for sure.
as an
Yes.
investor.
Yeah.
And for founders, my my perspective is you're getting evaluated anyway. Wouldn't you like to know some of the ways that you're getting evaluated going into this? Like, wouldn't it help level the playing field a little bit if you had a sense that someone was using better analytics to evaluate you instead of just like a gut feel, which could be quite biased?
Yeah. I would argue that a gut feel is very biased. I mean, it's by its nature, right? Which, by the way, is again, is not about me, but that's how I operate, which is one of the
That,
reasons why I don't hire anybody, right?
but you have self-awareness about the fact that you might have biases. I mean, I think it's okay to, of course, you have to pay attention to what your gut feel is telling you, but I think often these patterns that inform our gut feeling, like where are they coming from? And I don't think enough people question the patterns that are behind those instincts.
Yep, that
And
makes
some of
sense.
them, yeah. So mm.
So, use case, right? So, what have you found so far that was consistent with your intent to start the company? Are you finding more revenue and engagement from the investors, VCs, and accelerators, and so forth, or more from the people preparing to be invested in?
So the original intent was very much that the incentive would come from the investor and lead check writers essentially, because they have more authority to ask, founders to take something like this. And so I think one of the interesting things that surfaced and that we found is that more investors are interested in post check assessment and support. So more investors are interested in, hey, I'm going to make the decision on who I invest in, but then please come in and let's get a baseline of this individual or team's capacity and let's help them evolve over
Improve.
time.
Nice. That's actually probably more lucrative.
Yeah,
I mean,
for us,
I'm
because
always thinking about business case, right? So forgive me, but you know, that's probably because uh, the horse has already run out of the barn. So let's help them get better, right?
yes. And I think that mitigates against what we were just talking about, where people feel like they, part of their job or part of their role or their special sauce is their ability to read people. And so I think even if that's right or wrong, or even if they're good or not, that kind of bypasses that argument or discomfort that we were, I think, experiencing when we first went out to market with this.
Yeah. And so how does that work? Um, you're interviewing the business development part of it. You're interviewing the VCs and the accelerators, and you make them aware of your service, and then they say, okay, this makes sense. So it's like a coaching model on some level, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is new to the investing world. I would say assessment tools and leadership development is a lot more accepted in corporate environments, like later stage company environments. And so the venture capitalists and accelerators I've talked to this has been new to them in terms of a tool. Very few have been using any sort of leadership assessment or coaching. And if they do, it's the coaching part's very informal, or they let the founder decide who coaches them. So it's kind of an interesting landscape. And I think there's been a lot of education and just a lot of like curiosity and just wanting to dialogue about, I hadn't thought of people analytics as like a layer of analytical capability I could embed into my decision making. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's been fascinating from that perspective.
So is it, again? Forgive me. I look at things in terms of business oftentimes because that's sort of my mindset as an investor. But is this require? Does the automation of AI make it so you can scale the business so it's not just you doing the assessment and interpreting the assessment? I mean, can you take in 100 uh, companies and leaders to do this on at scale?
Yes, and that's one of the things we're, like any good startup ourselves, we're pivoting at the moment. And one of the big insights has been getting people to sit down for 45 minutes to take an assessment is quite onerous,
Yeah.
especially for busy founders. So it's been great that we can now take transcript data from it. We can't just take a 5-minute clip. Like, we need a substantial body of transcript data, but that again can come from an interview or, a speech you delivered or a conversation you had, and we can ingest that and get to the same results. Where we would want a human intervention is if it was somebody that we were going to coach. So we'd really want to ingest and like probably listen to the transcripts ourselves and really get into the mindset of that individual so that we could coach them. But the vast majority of assessment capabilities can now be done with AI at a high degree of accuracy.
And once the assessment is done, what's the next step?
So we create a
With
cut.
just the AI, I mean,
Oh, with
without
just
the
the AI.
yeah, without the where you do the assessment with the transcript, and it gives an outcome that you are hoping to achieve, whatever that outcome happens to be. Then what?
So once we receive the score with the basically the AI gives us its readout of the individual or team. We can do this for co-founders as well, or executive teams. Once it does that, then that goes into a dashboard, and so you get a readout of your results. And then if you want to go deeper with coaching, then that's where we create a custom coaching roadmap. It's customizable, depends on how deep or how long you want to go, and then we take it from there.
So, is the natural outcome to do the coaching on a one-to-one basis?
It depends on, so, we have a client right now who's very interested in using our capabilities to look at more of a quick assessment of people that he's interested in potentially bringing on to the team. And so we haven't gotten to the point where we would coach them yet, because he just wants to do kind of the initial assessment. And then others, we have a prospective client who wants to bring this to a larger VC firm that has like 40 companies, and they would all need coaching. And so, we're kind of just seeing a variety of different appetites for the
And
capabilities.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if the outcome is one that's on the continuum of really bad and really good, somewhere in the top third, is that give someone comfort, or does it have to be on the 99th percentile?
Oh, I think that's such a good question. Yeah, you can run the tools so it's you can do a high, medium, and low if you want to just do a quick ranking, or you can get into the numeric scoring and look at specific flags. So, for instance, say someone is somewhat low on purposeful agility, which is one of our constructs, which means, are they good at pivoting quickly under pressure while keeping the mission in mind, or like the goal of the company? So say they're low on that, but high on coachability. So that would kind of be a nicer combination than the opposite, where someone was really good at pivoting quickly, but was very low on coachability, because they might be pivoting and good at like making those quick decisions and being strategic, but they're not taking in information in a way that's strategic to their business. And so they might be making and ultimately kind of run off course in a more of an ego driven way, and refuse to listen to people as they start to get more stressed. And so,
See a bit of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so those are the kinds of patterns you can identify pretty quickly using this tool.
So, without revealing your secret sauce, what is the data set that you're able to put this transcript against that allows you with confidence to come out with an assessment that's credible? and I'm not, that wasn't a malicious question. It's kind of
No, not
sounded,
at all. I think
yeah.
the foundational credibility is so important. Well, this is where AI comes in, and then my co-founder is has studied adult vertical development for his entire career. So he's a psychologist and data scientist with an MBA, which is sort of like an amazing trifecta.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
so he was able to digest all the literature we could find that directionally supported the constructs we chose, showing that there was a positive correlation between having a higher um, uh, score on these constructs, or exhibiting these a higher ability along these constructs, and positive startup success. So we basically digested the literature, and we looked at vertical development frameworks as a mechanism to create the backbone of the assessment.
And was any of it uh, also data? Well, I mean, I imagine it would be really hard to assess. Look at the cohort of companies that were, successful, not successful, wildly successful. You would have had to assess those people to attain that data to show hold it against somebody's transcript that you take in now. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah,
kind of
like
a convoluted question, but I think you get my point.
this is by no means um, a perfect approach. Like there's always more validation we could do, and because this particular construct of six didn't exist as an assessment before, we can't with perfect confidence say yes, if you have high scores in all of these, you're going to have a successful company, or like even if you have four of them, you're going to have a more successful company. But what we saw in the literature is that if you tend to exhibit higher abilities in these various areas, you're more likely to have a successful outcome, whether that's raising an additional round or having an exit. Like leaders who exhibited these qualities were more likely to have a positive startup outcome. And so you can't perfectly say it was because
Of
they
course.
had emotional,
Yeah.
but I think there's also this dimension that I keep trying to point back to from a business perspective, which is wouldn't you rather know this about someone than not know it? And B, doesn't it seem kind of intuitive, if you will, or makes sense, a
Sensible.
semblance of sense that if you're more coachable, if you're more emotionally resilient, you're probably not going to break down under pressure as
Yeah.
much as you would if you had lower scores on that. So I think there's still validity in knowing this about a person or team,
Yeah.
aside from perfect correlations in the literature.
Well, I think what you said a few times is you're better off knowing it than not, right? And so, does it cost $5,000 to know this? $20,000 to know this? How does it work?
It depends. I mean, we have a couple dimensions to our pricing. One is volume, one is fully automated versus some human scoring. And then the third component is coaching or not. So
Yeah.
it ranges from, a couple $100s to multiple $1,000, depending on where you are in that
Yeah,
need
totally makes
or
sense.
range. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not going to remember the name of this, but there was a VC that pitched on Family Office Insights that only invested in companies that would engage some sort of coach that they had on retainer.
Okay. Yeah.
That was their prerequisite. Is that, you know, and I can't remember the name, or I tell you. I mean, but it was just it was the first time that I had seen something like that, right? And I've seen thousands, but which doesn't mean it isn't happening. It just means that I
That's what
didn't
I'm
see it.
saying. It's surprising how little this is, how little support that companies are given. Even post check writing. I think a lot of venture capital firms have, or the industry itself has accepted that 9 out of 10 companies are going to fail, and that they're just going to focus on one. And I think that's an interesting assumption, or just interesting acceptance. Um,
Yeah.
And so, yes, we're dealing in a risky asset class, but at the same time, what if you could help just one more of those? If most of it's people problems, what if you could help coach or support a team that could have made it, but they just fell apart because of their.
Oh, well, I'm going to go on record and say because they just don't care. Uh, and that's one of the issues that people have with venture presently. And you have to break venture into multiple silos because there's Andreessen Horowitz, there's the next level down, and then there's everybody else, right?
Right, right,
So,
of course. There's
uh,
some really
and so
amazing professionals out there.
yeah. Um, and so the VC business and it's changing, and I can't tell you whether it's good or bad or how it's changing but it's changing on some level to, not flushing 90% or 95% of the investments. And, the whole model was based on we'll give you as much money as you need. And when you don't perform, because money's the only solution, then we'll just flush it because we
Yeah.
have two that is going to be, unicorns or deca unicorns, and that'll make up, and so be it. And so that was like, Silicon Valley culture, not just Silicon Valley, but largely. Yeah.
But it seems like I'm really curious. I have a curiosity around this, which is what are the LPs saying in the equation, like family offices or other LPs that are coming in to the venture firms? Like, I wonder why or what those conversations are looking
Why would they
like.
put up with it?
Yeah.
It's the same reason why you paid Stevie Cohen 4 and 40 to manage it in his hedge fund because he produced 65%. You
But if most
basically
VCs aren't outperforming the market.
no, that's true. And there was Silicon Valley, and again, I'm going on record. I don't care. I have friends that own VCs. Uh, they did an amazing job of creating FOMO. Like
Yeah.
that was their they perfected it. They said, "Oh, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure you can get in, but maybe you can." And so that's how
Yes.
and then when you have some performance numbers behind you, you had a couple of those unicorns, then all of a sudden the institutional money comes in that shaves off 2% of their AUM and gives it to you because you performed. And they accepted, as did the family offices, as did not as much, because it's hard to generalize about family offices, but they tend to think longer term,
Yes.
and they tend to that if they're going to swing for the fences on something like that, it's a very very small increment of their assets.
Mm-hmm. That's
Uh,
true.
they tend to you don't have to swing for the fences when you've got $4 billion. What for what purpose, right? What's the point, right? You don't need to make a billion. You just want to keep your stay rich money. So
Absolutely.
it depends. Yeah, I think you're in the right spot though. uh, Although if I think about it for a minute, there are private equity firms that actually, besides aggregating businesses and then improving their multiple because they're of scale and they sell them off to BlackRock, private equity might be a really good place for you to do this because the private equity people are, again, I'm generalizing and people will criticize me and I just don't care. But they tend to be more thoughtful about their operating companies. Like they tend to say, let's talk to Logan because you can improve your dynamics within the company so you can grow and we can get better multiples. And when you sell, uh,
Yes. And we are
I
very
just think
interested
that
in
private equity might be a better place for you.
I that and I don't think I finished my sentence on the other thread, but we are pivoting essentially to well, we've been looking at as middle market companies, but
Yeah.
certainly open to private equity. But yeah, we're finding that venture is a bit informal and just isn't used to using assessment tools and things like that. So while we definitely still have clients in that space and will continue to sell into that market, we're pivoting. So.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you founders. and leaders in companies, more so founders than the leadership that you hire in the C-suite, are usually pretty egomaniacal, which is part of the reason why they're successful because they're running through walls, right? How has it been so far on their acceptance of the coaching?
Your question is
When someone gets
on.
assessed and then they decide they want coaching, how is that working out?
Yeah, I mean, it's mixed. Again,
Yeah.
I think we usually see a correlation. If someone is hesitant to take an assessment, they're probably going to score lower on coachability, and then they're
Right.
not going to want coaching. I've heard a lot of responses at this point across the board, as you might expect. But I've heard people say, "I'm afraid to take this." I've heard people say, "I don't do this kind of thing." I've heard people say, this was too long. I've heard, but I've also heard we've had great testimonials, from founders and investors saying, wow, this blew my mind. This was incredible. I can't believe how much information you got about me. So I think what I take it as is if someone's willing to take this assessment, I think that says something in and of itself. And so those people are more likely to be coachable or have used coaches in the past. And I think one of the things with coaching is that such a broad term. It's really the Wild West at this point in terms of what is a coach. And so we're trying to bring some stability and rigor to the coaching industry as well, not to denigrate coaches, but I've had a multitude of different experiences with coaches myself. And what we're doing is establishing a capacity baseline along this vertical development trajectory. And it's very clear how you can move people up. And so it's clear where you're headed. And I think that's where there's a mismatch with a lot of coaches where they're not necessarily like taking you on a journey that makes sense or that you can see the next step in. It's kind of been all across the board.
Yeah. Super interesting. It's a little woo woo, and I'll admit it, but I've done the human design evaluation. Do you know what that is?
I haven't actually done that one.
And it was massively valuable.
Oh, that's great. I'm
And
glad you had a good experience.
it was, uh, it basically pointed out what I already knew. But you know how when you read a book and you have the story and you go, wow, I could never put that into words, but that's exactly what it was. It was
Yes.
more of that type of experience. And it also was spot on in its valuation, like there's categories. And I'm a manifest generator, which is exactly what I've been doing all my life, right? Like, I can't work for anybody and, all that kind of stuff. But it was, it's woo woo, I admit it, but it was really, really interesting. And I went into it with a little bit of reluctance, but once it was a good evaluator. It really pointed out some massively valuable things that I then took and accelerated. Right?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you use a coach or did you just implement for
So you
yourself?
can get it. You can get a $100 one online that's actually pretty good, but I used somebody that knew exactly what to do.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you took that next step and worked with
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
just, it made sense. If I was going to invest the time, I wanted to have, somebody that knew what they were doing.
No, I mean, I love hearing these stories. I think just to kind of point out my perspective on the current status quo of assessments, they don't typically include this vertical development component and they're not using AI. So that's really they're static. They don't give you a roadmap for how to grow and they're not using AI. So it's hard to scale and easy to game, like you were talking about before. So if I want to be an ENTJ and the Myers Briggs, I can ask ChatGPT, like, how do I answer these questions? Um,
Right.
and so that's kind of what we're mitigating, being able to just take this transcript data or interview someone.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you can't game that. It is what it is, right? Yeah. Yeah. So how much of a transcript do you need? 30 minutes, an hour? More is better?
More is better. It's a good question in terms of like the bottom threshold of what we need. We haven't run into an issue. Like we usually have at least 45 minutes of someone speaking or doing a podcast or something like that. So I would say that's kind of our minimum of like 45 minutes of speaking content.
If you did 5 podcasts from that person, would that be better?
Yes, it would always be better to have, you can get more and more accurate, but you get the general pattern from, um, again, this is where the art of like the scoring comes in, and um, there are certain things you can more easily evaluate than others. So our full assessment is ideal because we're getting everything we need for the full assessment, but there's many things we can pull out just from the transcripts.
Yeah. So what's the delta? Is it thousands of dollars for the full assessment and 200 for just a transcript or two? And I'm just curious. I'm not trying to back you in the corner. Just give me a range. Yeah.
It's in the order of, I would say, so like the fully automated transcript is, there's a bit of a setup fee, but it's in the order of hundreds of dollars between
Yeah.
like just the transcript and taking the full assessment and getting like if you want a human to be involved in the report out, it's a bit more. There's a bigger delta, but it's, all, it's not thousands of dollars to do all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really the
Super.
coaching that gets you into the higher price bracket.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense because you have a person involved, right?
Well, and ultimately, we want this to be a systems change. We want this to be infrastructure in investment decision making or company decision making, where people analytics are a lot more accessible and people can make better decisions off of them. And then we have better innovation outcomes and better business outcomes and better investing outcomes because the people side is more functional. We can create better effective teams and know like this person is not very strong in their emotional intelligence. Let's bring in someone who is on the team that can kind of liaise for them.
Right. Yeah.
um,
I like that.
so yeah.
Are you, I know it's early on in the business, but have you found a uh, type of company, VC, accelerator, private equity, uh, more interesting for you to do than others?
I mean, for me personally, groups that are in the impact investing world that have some sort of like mission related investing ethos tend to be more interesting because the people that choose to go into those firms often have like a bigger mission in mind that they want to achieve, and that tends to correlate to higher levels of vertical development if you look at the patterns.
That
So I
totally
think,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, so the visionaries that are in the impact investing world, it's been interesting to see that correlation in the data.
Wow. So altruism makes better leaders.
Well, I think it makes for, but they have other, often may have other hangups. Like we assessed one of my good friends who's running a very progressive, I wouldn't say progressive, it's very visionary platform for coaches. And, he's very visionary and he scored high on a few of the constructs, but he has trouble making difficult, scored lower on the purposeful agility because he tends to have this harmony bias where he wants everyone to agree with him. And so
Yeah.
he listens really well, but then when it comes to making hard decisions, he struggles. And so we see that in a lot of the higher levels of development where you're almost taking too many things into consideration and it can stall your the speed in which you can make decisions. So it's about becoming conscious of those ways in which you might stall out as you evolve.
Yeah. I see that as super valuable if you're willing not to lie to yourself.
Yes, and this is a lot of this is predicated on a lot of self-reflection and willingness to see yourself objectively, which is I think a really important aspect of, especially moving into the speed and complexity we are in our marketplace today. It's we need leaders who can stay grounded and hold a lot of different pieces while they move and maneuver.
I think it's fascinating that you're able to assess people without them doing the assessment themselves because that's so easy to game.
Oh, to game?
Yeah. No, I'm saying I think it's really valuable that you could take a transcript of somebody, let's just say a prospective employee, right? Have a YouTube or a podcast transcript of them, drop it into your system, and use that to with or without their knowledge to evaluate where they can fit into your organization without
Hmm.
them taking a Myers-Briggs or whatever the one that people use now, which they clearly can game against, right?
Yeah, I think we're moving into really exciting territory. It's essentially like a disruption of the assessment industry to a
Yeah,
large degree.
really, really
Now we
interesting.
just have to be confident that the person's publicly available presentation isn't just an AI bot.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
That's where we, I don't know how to solve for that yet, but
yeah, yeah. I don't know how we're going to solve for that either because it's getting increasingly difficult. Um, what a circle we've come. You can't trust the media because they're making up stuff all the time and they're really not journalists. You can't trust the social media posts because there's so many bots and you don't know whose agenda they're trying to. And it's not even the social media companies. It's that it's a it's a fertile ground for people to uh, uh, launch their agendas, right?
exactly, yeah.
So it's kind of
But
like freedom is good, but there are limitations, right?
yeah, we live in a wild, but I think vertical development, and this psychological um, research that we've brought into the fold is really powerful because I think at higher levels of development, you kind of your orientation towards the system and your kind of ethical guardrails really show up because you realize that you're part of this ecosystem and that you are connected to everything and that the influence you have, you want to be in integrity and you see yourself just as one point in the system instead of being so self-directed and so ego driven. And so, I would hope that everyone would be more conscious of where they were along this developmental curve, and I think that our society would see a lot of positive benefits from that. So, aside from my company, I'm just excited about the work.
Yeah, yeah. I could totally see how that would make. Look, what did Tony Robbins say, or whoever he stole it from? With a life not examined is not a life well lived, or something like that.
Not a life worth living. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good quote.
yeah. And so, I mean, there's endless amounts of people that are not interested in lifelong learning or improvement just for a whole host of reasons. They're complacent, not interested. They've never been taught that that's a good thing. But there's lots of people that are super interested in that, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I think it's great to be able to identify them and give them money to lead companies, and so
totally. Especially in this country, it's it's fertile ground to grow companies. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are aligned. We have our problems, but it arguably is the best place in the world to build a business. You have rule of
absolutely.
law. You don't have, you got bribery, but you don't have it like I own a coconut plantation in Brazil. I haven't made money in 13 years because I have to pay everybody off,
Wow.
right?
Yeah,
And
these
it's
are
just the way of
real
life,
roadblocks.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And there's no way around it. It's just the way they operate, right? Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fertile ground to build businesses here, and you're seeing it, right? You've seen it in your career how people have succeeded and failed, but there's opportunity. Just you can't sit around and let it happen to you. You have to make it happen. But the opportunity's there. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and we're talking, and then no, I totally agree with that. This is the arguably the best place in the world to start a company, and it's like, and still we have 65% of companies failing because of some sort of people problem. Can we help improve that? Like, can we
Yeah.
do better? And I think we can.
It really makes sense. Do you have stats on the level, the percentage of failure not attributed to people problems? That'd be
From
interesting
this was
contrast.
this was a Harvard Business Review study that's
Or
based on about
McKinsey too
40.
did that, right? Or I saw
I couldn't
something on
find
that.
the McKinsey source for it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Um, but it's based on like 14,000 ish companies. And
Uh-huh.
so I would assume the other 35% would be, market, lack of problem, product market fit, um, running out of money, go to market strategy. But I think again, some of that comes down to, did the person freeze under pressure and stress?
Yeah.
Did they not get along with their co-founder? I still think the other side, that's 35%, still probably has some connection to the individual and the team that was leading the charge.
Yeah.
Some bad business ideas are bad, or they're badly timed, and I'm not
Yeah.
arguing with that. But I do think even more than we think are are connected to the leadership.
Yeah. Look, we see, like I mentioned, we see 200 applicants a month, and there's a lot of them that are just dumb. Like we just, right. That's not going to work. And it's not because we're so smart. It's just that we've been around for a little while, right?
Yeah, and that pattern
And
recognition is valuable.
right, and I'd be delighted if they succeeded. Like I'm not trying to wish them any ill will, but I just, you know, based on my experience, there's probably better things for you to do, right? So, well, this has been awesome. I'm super curious, so forgive all my questions, but it was really interesting to hear about this.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It was a great conversation, and then thank you for your curiosity and follow up questions. And yeah, if anyone wants to find me, I'm at founderready.io.
Oh, great. Make sure everybody knows that. Well, like I said, we'll share this with you and share it with the group, um, and then we'll make sure they know how to get hold of you as well. Logan, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arthur.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. See you next time.
All right, appreciate it.